Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. Up first graphic here showing snowfall amounts that fell. We had some pretty significant snowfall occur last night and into today. Cook Inlet on up into the Matanuska Valley. And Nikiski picking up 10 inches. A lot of that drifted into much higher drifts due to 30-mile-an-hour gusty winds they had. Willow also had 10 inches of snow. Kenai, 8.8 inches, and Girdwood picked up around 7 inches, all in in the last 24 hours or so. And also McGrath picked up 4 to 6 inches of snow, and all of those amounts were a lot more than what I thought you were going to get yesterday. Anyway, moving on, we've got winter storm watch out for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for starting tomorrow, continuing through Tuesday, as possible winds kicking up to 50 miles an hour. If that happens, then that'll create local whiteout conditions at times across the area up there. Again, that's for tomorrow into Tuesday. And we've got winter weather advisories out here for the interior for continued snow, and in the case of the Alaskan Range, winds gusting 50 miles an hour, creating low visibilities there, and additional snows here in the central interior, southern slopes of the southeastern Brooks Range area, including Arctic Village, and also snow advisory out for the Yakutat area. But there's a winter storm warning out here for Juneau, Douglas, Admiralty Island there that kicks in later tonight and continues through tomorrow. And that's for anywhere from, let's see, 6 to 12 inches of snow expected to fall there with the incoming moisture. So kind of a big change in the weather pattern occurring there from the cool, dry conditions you've had to a little bit milder and definitely wetter. And then down here to the south, we've got a coastal flood watch out for the Bristol Bay coast from Good News Bay to Port Hayden. And that's out for tomorrow as a pretty snappy system expected to move right over the area. The good tide gradient and strong southwest winds to start, swinging around to the west and then northwest. It's going to be a pretty quick shot, and still a watch instead of a warning, because it's still a little iffy on exactly where the low tracks would make a world of difference as to whether any coastal flooding occurs or not. If it's a little farther to the north and then doesn't take a turn to the east as soon as it may, well, then it'd be definitely into a warning. We'll have to see and continue to wait and see what happens. On satellite image, you can see a huge mass of clouds here in over the interior. Again, the snow here, southern Alaska, changing over to rain, Port Graham into Seldovia and Homer this afternoon, and then ending pretty significant amounts today. Iliamna about 2/3 of an inch of precipitation. AKwx, southwest Kodiak Island, about 1/3 of an inch as this passed through, just 200s at the state airport there. And back to the west, again, storm here coming into the Aleutians, the next system. That brought about 1/2 an inch of rain to Adak here in the 12-hour period ending this afternoon, as well as, and also with this system, 1/2 an inch of rain also fell at Port Graham there on the southern Kenai Peninsula. And again, as I mentioned, 2/3 of an inch at Iliamna. That's water equivalent. Some of that fell as snow. But winds gusting as high as 60 miles an hour with this system, so definitely gale force winds with it. Adak, Atka, and Nikolsky all had winds gusting to 60 miles an hour during the afternoon hours. And this system brought some pretty gusty winds through Turnagain Arm. McHugh Creek had a peak wind gust of 87 miles per hour, Portage 60 miles an hour. And even up at Palmer, they had winds kick up to 46 miles per hour, and that pushed their temperature up into the lower 40s. Otherwise, out over the Delta, winds gusting as high as 45 miles per hour with this. And that whole system here weakening as the low tracks up to the north and northeast toward the, actually it'll move all the way up to the Arctic coast here tomorrow afternoon. But the front will really weaken here, especially over the eastern interior portion, and this will slide slide eastward as it weakens into the Panhandle, but should bring that snow into the Juneau area. On the chart today, here's that low scooting northward here, and almost into Norton Sound currently there with an area of snow from southern Seward Peninsula all the way back in and down to the Kenai Peninsula, ended already at Kodiak, and possible mixture of precipitation right along the outer coastline here. As I mentioned, Homer, Seldovia did change over to rain, and had some light snow into Yakutat, and really not much of that getting up into the Copper River Basin and or the Tanana Valley, upper Tanana Valley, with those winds, Delta Junction, gusting as high as 50 miles an hour during the day today. Here's the next system. Rain and snow into the Fox Islands, snow moving into the Pribilofs, and then strong winds on the south side of this system, and that's going to track to the northeast. And for tonight, you can see good southwest winds blowing right into Bristol Bay there. The front up into northeastern Bristol Bay late tonight. They'll spread a band of snow up and across mainly the Kuskokwim Delta, and to a lesser extent, whatever gets the Yukon Delta will be lighter than what gets into the Kuskokwim Delta. Southern Kuskokwim Valley also see another increase in the snow. Mostly rain for Kodiak Island. Could go either way for the Pribilofs there with that low passing just to the south of St. George. Snow showers following in behind. This system continues to weaken, but quite an area of snow continues as far as coverage-wise. And a few more inches possible in some locations. I don't think anything additionally will be too heavy. Look for some clearing on the central Arctic coast. And then this front weakening as it pushes the snow into the northern Panhandle. Mixture, say from Sitka to Port Alexander, staying dry down to the south. And then for tomorrow, you can see high pressure gone here off the area. So that's going to allow a lot of moisture to flow right into the southeast here. And depending on your latitude and elevation and time of day, that'll determine whether it's in the form of rain or snow. But definitely possible mixed precipitation back along the North Gulf Coast. More snow coming into south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, and the Kuskokwim Valley as well. This low center tracking up toward possibly Dillingham. Strong west winds with that coming around there, so that'll make for quite a windy day for the southern Bristol Bay area and the Alaska Peninsula, eventually into Kodiak Island. But those winds swing around to the northwest pretty rapidly tomorrow evening. Otherwise, up to the north there, that weakening low drifts to just east of central Arctic coast there, and snow diminishing with it, persisting, but just pretty light snow, nothing more than an inch, maybe an inch and a half. Most areas you'll see less. Considerably drier here over the Bering Sea with some clearing. St. Lawrence Island into Norton Sound, possibly the Seward Peninsula. Weak system by comparison, pushing into the far western Aleutians with small craft advisory level winds, maybe a narrow band of gale force winds in advance of the front, but nothing really significant, and bringing with it some periods of light snow. Outlook for Tuesday, that low gone here all the way up, kind of splits and dissipates as it moves in. Looking at a cold front here, bringing areas of light snow into the mid and upper Tanana Valley areas. High pressure, colder temperatures. Actually, colder temperatures will spread all the way down to the North Gulf Coast during the day on Tuesday with much drier conditions. Lingering showers diminishing along the Alaska Range. Look for a brief period of blowing snow on the eastern Arctic coast there, and that's what the winter storm watches out for, the tightening gradient with this trough dropping down to the southeast. Next storm pushes up into the southeastern Bering Sea with another round of wind and rain for the Alaska Peninsula. Snow for the Pribilofs, a mix for the Fox Islands, and then snow showers back to the west with pretty weak systems out in that area. Snowfall levels come back down from however high they rise tomorrow and tomorrow night here for the Panhandle, and snow changes to snow showers and diminishes in the afternoon during the day on Tuesday here, getting pretty scattered up in the north, and look for some clearing along the North Gulf Coast. Lows tonight, a little below zero or either side of zero here up in the north and northeast part of the state. Upper 20s to lower 30s here from Bristol Bay, mid 30s to upper 30s Alaska Peninsula, Fox Islands. Lows 21 to 31 for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow 30 to 35 south central Alaska, in the teens. Kobuk, Koyukuk, upper Yukon Valley there on out to the Arctic coast. Highs tomorrow in the 30s for the southeast coast, lower 40s for Kodiak and the Alaska Peninsula, near 40 for king salmon. And in Alaska, Otherwise, moving on to lows for Tuesday morning, we've got shade below zero there on the western Arctic coast and a little above on the east side. Otherwise, single numbers in teens here, so kind of chilling down again with the chillier air coming in. Mid-20s south central Alaska, teens in the Susitna Valley, and lows mostly in the 30s for the southeast coast there. Mid-30s staying above freezing for Kodiak. Upper 20s, lower 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, down into the mid-teens there for the St. Lawrence Island zone. And for the highs, 10 to 15 here, upper Yukon Valley westward all the way out to Noatak, and 4 for Arctic Village.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather aviation, IFR streaming right in to the southwest here from the southeast Bering Sea, improving back behind there. Some pretty good VFR breaking out. A lot of marginal VFR tomorrow morning over the interior, right on down to the Gulf of Alaska, across southern Alaska. And conditions coming down as some moisture finally busts through into the northern panhandle to start with. You can see marginal VFR actually overspreads the entire southeast coast by tomorrow afternoon, with IFR over the northern third of the panhandle, extending back to about Cordova, marginal for Prince William Sound, Copper River Basin. In this area, IFR shifting eastward, spilling into the Susitna Valley and possibly northern Cook Inlet down to about Wasilla. And marginal VFR, Kenai Peninsula, marginal northward, VFR here on the lee side of the Alaska Range, Upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country to the Yukon River, more marginal VFR as you get in the upslope area of the Brooks Range, and then back to VFR here on the lee side of the Brooks Range, and areas of marginal VFR here for the Bering Sea with the next band IFR and the next front pushing into Shimianatu. Then for Tuesday morning, that doesn't really advance much, kind of slips down here to the south, and marginal VFR with a break here over the eastern Bering, and then marginal VFR scattered around as well, or mostly marginal over the interior with some IFR scattered around and VFR scattered around, notably Kodiak Island and Cook Inlet here, with IFR over most of the panhandle, mainly toward the east, patch up here on the North Gulf Coast. And then for Tuesday afternoon, IFR hanging on but diminishing there over the panhandle. VFR in the increase here over the interior with some lingering IFR eastern Arctic coast, and then a huge area IFR, a big plume of it here over the Aleutians, eastward to the Alaska Peninsula, pulling northward to the Pribilofs. And for passes for tomorrow, Monday, Anaktuvik and Atigan, IFR trending toward marginal, or kind of going either way the entire day, but I think it'll be a improving trend into the afternoon from what you see in the morning there for both those passes. Lake Clark and Merrill, occasional IFR. Rainy, optimistically, I'll call that one mostly marginal. And windy, marginal VFR for the pass south entrance, VFR on the north side. And Isabel, IFR becoming marginal. Mintasta VFR, Tanita, marginal VFR, becoming VFR midday through the afternoon. And it's kind of touch and go actually for Tanita. And for Portage, marginal VFR, maybe some more moisture increases in the afternoon for IFR conditions. And then Chilkoot and White definitely becoming IFR. And for the freezing level here at the surface, northern Bristol Bay, north of the Pribilof, south of Nunivak Island, hugging the coastline here all the way down, a little bit farther inland again, especially down here to the south, 2,000 feet now, up along the central and south coast of the Panhandle. And for icing, moisture sliding into the northern and southeast coast, so the icing threat increases with it, with an area of considerable moderate here. Elfin Cove up in toward the Valdez area, and then lighter icing threats here for Bristol Bay, and some more up here over the northwest and north slope areas. Icing free much of the Bering Sea, except with the next system pushing in way out there to the west. Jet stream, upper level low, actually tracking eastward now, be coming up tonight and then moving up into the interior and then starting to pull to the east, higher pressure back to the west, so we'll get another round of chillier air coming in behind this later in the day, Monday and Tuesday. Otherwise, good southwest flow right into the Panhandle, and at 9,000 feet, shaping up like this, complex low center up there, or a couple of low centers along the Arctic coast. So westerlies at about 25 through the northern interior. This low heading northeastward into roughly about this position over the southwest tomorrow afternoon. Really strong winds with this, 40 to as high as 60 knots on the south side of that. Pretty good gradient there. Southwest flow right across the Gulf of Alaska and into the Panhandle, 35 to 40 knots. Southerlies 25 over the eastern interior. And at 3,000 feet, same pattern here. Westerlies up to 25, north slope to about the Brooks Range. Lighter as you head south, and much lighter, just 10 to 20 over the Copper River Basin. And good westerlies, 40 to 50 knots across the Alaska Peninsula, clipping Kodiak Island. And those southwesterlies on the increase throughout the day, 15 to 25 for the southeast coast. Turbulence-wise, widespread moderate chop here, Kodiak Island, northeast Bristol Bay, Kamishak Bay, all the way out to the Alaska Peninsula, and a little bit of bumpy conditions northern Panhandle.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
Averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's different types of impacts on communication systems, and the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar. And ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability will be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there, or we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles. They can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of their passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of their primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out-of-state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if you've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot, we've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both of those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so that'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to today's sea ice analysis. Actually, some new ice forming along the west coast in the areas that it had blown offshore. Kind of thin new stuff, not a whole lot, like on the north side of the Seward Peninsula here and possibly St. Lawrence Island. But that's not going to really continue. General pattern for probably most of the upcoming week will be for surges of southerly winds to come across the eastern Bering. So I'll continue to push that ice edge on up to the north. Coastal water forecast, west winds 20 knots, south coast, and then about 25 here roughly on the central coast, southwest 20 to 25 north side. Lynn Canal south 30 knots. Gusts to 45 knots, and gale force gusts out of the southeast for Stevens Passage, and southeast to 20 for Clarence Strait. Outlook for Tuesday, Clarence Strait, south winds 20 knots. Same thing for Stevens Passage, but still holding on to those gale force gusts at 35. And winds swing around to the north, become light for Lynn Canal. Otherwise, good stiff west 30-knot wind here on the south coast, diminishing back to northwest 20 up north. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, we've got south winds out about 20 knots, and the North Gulf Coast, southerlies 25 to 30 for small craft advisories. Gale force winds for the Barren Islands, southwest 25, south 30 Kamishak Bay, 25-knot wind, southern Cook Inlet, southeast 15 for the northern inlet. Excuse me. And then for Tuesday, southwest at 10 here for northern Cook Inlet, west 30 knots south of the Forelands, gale force westerlies in store for Kamishak Bay, even stronger for the Barrens, 40 knots there, northwest 35, western North Gulf Coast, and northwest 25 to 30 here for the east side. Prince William Sound, northwest winds at 30 knots, definitely higher gusts out of some of the bays up there with seas at 7 feet. And for Kodiak, good gales, southwest 35 to 40 knots, 40-knot winds back to Castle Cape. Alaska Peninsula, southwest 45 knots, and south 40 knots there for Bristol Bay with that storm rolling on through. Those will become westerly in the afternoon and then actually early in the evening go northwest and diminish. And then for Tuesday, Kodiak Island, west 25 to 30. We've got east-southeast 25 to 30 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, northeast 20 for Bristol Bay with seas coming down about 8 feet. And for the Fox Islands, on Alaska Island, west 45 knots, Unmak Island west 30 to 40 knots, and 30-knot westerlies for Adak and Atska, and south 30 increased back up to maybe 40 knots here for the western Aleutians. And then those drop back to 20 knots out of the west, south 20 here over toward Adak, and kind of a squirrely pattern here. Well, east-northeast 25 to 30, mainly for Atka Island, and probably lighter for Adak. And then for the Fox Islands, east-southeast 30 to 35 knots. Southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, northwest 25, northeast 25, north of the island. St. Matthew, north 25, northwest 30 for the Pribilofs. And St. Lawrence Island, light northwest winds and light also for Norton Sound with west set wind at 15. Those even go down to 10 knots there for the Sound on Tuesdays and then become southeast 15, so stay in light for St. Lawrence Island. 20 knots out of the southeast here, north side of Nunivak Island, east coming up to 25 there along the Kuskokwim Delta coast, and a little stronger for the Pribilofs, east winds 30 knots, southeast 30 for St. Matthew Island. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, brisk wind advisories tomorrow, east 25 to 30 knots, lighter northeast at 20 on the central coast, north 20 on the west side. Brisk wind advisories here from Cape Thompson all the way down to Wales. And then they'll swing around to the south and come down to 15 to 20 knots here from Wales up to Cape Beaufort, west 20 for the western coast. And then brisk wind advisories here for the central and east side turn into gale force westerlies there. And of course those come up, and that's why there's a winter storm watch out for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight, we've got a winter storm warning out for the greater Juneau area, the greater Juneau area for 6 to 12 inches of snow starting tonight, continuing through tomorrow, and winter weather advisory for Yakutat for snow. And snow will taper off here, south central Alaska. A kind of a widespread area of light snow continues up here with winter weather advisories in the north central interior, but dry on the central Arctic coast. Next storm, wind, rain, mixed rain and snow, rain for Kodiak and snow for the Pribilofs here with that system moving in. And that moves right up into northern Bristol Bay tomorrow with a front bringing more snow across southern Alaska into the Panhandle. And the outlook for Tuesday, next storm into the eastern Aleutian areas.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.